Lamar Jackson deserves MVP over Josh Allen. Both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are worthy of MVP, but who is the most worthy? First, I'll explain why Josh deserves it, then I'll explain why Lamar deserves it. And after I've presented all the evidence, you will know exactly who deserves MVP. Now, reasons why Josh Allen deserves MVP over Lamar Jackson. There are 3 criteria that I'm going to be going off of. 1, individual performance in pivotal games. 2, individual record-breaking achievements this season, not consecutive seasons. And 3, value to team success. 1, I really like Chris Sims's explanation as to why Allen deserves the MVP.
The big thing in my point for Josh Allen would be it's moments. And Josh Allen's had some of the biggest moments in the league this year. One of the most iconic plays of the season is him breaking tackles against the Kansas City Chiefs, who nobody can freaking beat in football, and they beat him.
And Josh's biggest moment was clearly against the Chiefs when he finished them off himself. Notice how he didn't leave it to chance by relying on an end zone technicality like Chiefs-Ravens to decide the match. Allen won because he put his body on the line for the win like he always does. That 4th and 2 26-yard rushing touchdown was arguably the play of the year and ensured that not even the great Mahomes could come back from that. Josh also handed the Chiefs their only loss of the season that actually mattered. Sorry, not sorry, Broncos. And Shady McCoy had an excellent argument that I just had to include.
I'm gonna go with Josh, though. I knew none of the offensive weapons for Josh Allen would get picked for the Pro Bowl.
Deion Dawkins.
For the Ravens, I got some pieces over there. So when we talk about like who you doing these things with, I gotta go with Josh Allen. Khalil Shakir, he ain't gonna make no Pro Bowl. Matt Hollins, nobody going out there to go get him.
Shakir and Hollins, I still love you guys. 2, individual record-breaking achievements this season. I'll only include the records that Allen broke during the 2024 season. Josh Allen, only quarterback in NFL history with a passing, receiving, and rushing touchdown in a single game, with 3 passing and 3 rushing touchdowns in a regular season game. Did you notice that was in back-to-back weeks? And then he became the first player all time with at least 2 touchdown passes and 2 rushing touchdowns in consecutive games, Rams and Lions. Also, first quarterback in NFL history to record multiple passing touchdowns, multiple rushing touchdowns, 350-plus passing yards, and 60-plus rushing yards in the same game, and he did it against the number 1 seeded Lions, who were the number 1 offense at the time. No big deal. Then you have those 3 weeks where Allen solidified his case for MVP. And now I know the 49ers were riddled with injuries this game, but you can't deny how awesome Allen was in that game with the touchdown trifecta. Then in the Rams game, Allen showed off MVP numbers despite losing a very close 42-44 game. That's when Allen was the first quarterback to have that 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns in one game. And then you've got the Lions game. Allen was insane with 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns the week after he got the all-time record for passing and rushing touchdowns, and 3, value to team success. Here's the preseason narrative for Josh. Allen was always a great quarterback, but he was extremely susceptible to turnovers. Allen was a turnover machine, especially last season with 18 interceptions. This season, he only had 6. The Bills were also supposed to have a down/rebuilding year and weren't even the favorites for the AFC East. What's hilarious is Allen had his best season ever, even better than his 2020 season. Also, the Bills were the first NFL team ever to beat 2 14-win teams in one season. Now, did I mention that Allen combined for 747 total yards, 6 touchdowns, and 0 sacks in both of those games against the top-seeded teams in both conferences? And by week 17's end, you know, the last time Allen actually played a game, the Bills were 13-3 and the Ravens were 11-5. Yes, the AFC East was weaker than the AFC North, but one could argue that the Steelers and Browns were just as crappy as the Dolphins and Pats and Jets. Yes, the Bills only lost to playoff teams, but who lost to the Chiefs, Steelers, Browns, and Raiders? Despite losing his top 2 receivers in Diggs and Davis, Allen still maintained high performance levels, showcasing his insane ability to elevate his entire receiving core, to lock up the East in week 13 and secure the 2 seed in week 17. Allen made all his receivers look like Jamar Chase, and that's not a huge knock against the receivers, it's just that Allen is that good. The Bills also had 13 players with a touchdown this season, tied for all time in the NFL, because of Josh Allen and the mantra that everybody eats. As for team talent, the Bills had 2, arguably 3 if you included Cook, Pro Bowlers, and LT1 Deion Dawkins, and of course, Josh Allen. How many Pro Bowlers do the Ravens have? Oh, that's right, 9, a league high. So it's no wonder Lamar's doing so great with all that talent, whereas Josh Allen is doing amazing, even better than Lamar with far less talent. And yeah, the Pro Bowl is more of a popularity thing, but there's a reason why the Ravens had 9 and the Bills only had 2. To sum it up as simply as I can, Lamar has Henry, Josh has Who? While it's true that James Cook had an extremely huge impact on the run game for the Bills, his impact wasn't nearly as high as Derrick Henry, who rushed for nearly twice as many yards as Cook. Must be nice when you have one of the best running backs in the league where you can open up the passing game and throw to whoever you want, whenever you want. Also must be nice when you don't have to scramble or run as often because you got somebody else doing it for you. Now let's talk about why Lamar Jackson deserves MVP over Josh Allen. I admit that if stats were the only criteria for MVP, then of course Lamar would win over Josh, no questions asked. Also, I know I'm not a biased Ravens fan, but I believe Ravens fans will still appreciate my attempt. Number 1, individual performance in pivotal games. The Bills. The biggest argument that I have why Lamar Jackson deserves MVP is because he absolutely blew out the Bills in week 4. That's a pretty clear head-to-head win between the two top MVP candidates. Even I have to give Lamar respect because it wasn't just Henry who dominated. While Henry was amazing in that game, Lamar was also impressive, accounting for 2 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown of his own. Here are Allen's stats and Jackson's stats in the Bills game, and as you can see, it's not even close. Most Bills fans would say the Bills' run D sucks, which it did, and still does, and Henry did everything that game, but Lamar still delivered on his end, and how. What impressed me the second most was Lamar blowing out the Broncos 41-10, who supposedly had the #1 defense in the league. Lamar had a perfect passer rating against the Broncos with 280 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Henry rushed for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns, so that definitely helped. But Lamar did a lot of the heavy lifting in the blowout. And while not as strong as the Lions, still beating the Commanders by 7 and the Bucks by 10 is very impressive. Lamar threw for 323 yards and 1 tutty against the Commies, but he threw for 281 yards and 5 freaking tutties against the Bucks the very next week, achieving a near perfect 158.1 passer rating. And they were one of 7 playoff teams that Lamar beat himself. While one could argue the Bengals defense sucked, Lamar still put up 4 tutties in both matchups, including the win in OT in the first matchup. The reason it's so amazing is because he outdueled Joe freaking Burrow, who is one of the other top MVP candidates this season. Lamar's most iconic scramble touchdown throw was against the Bengals in week 5 when he quickly recovered from a bobbled snap, immediately stiff-armed Hubbard into the ground, and then as he was getting knocked out of bounds, threw a tutty to wide open Likely. That was absolutely nuts how Lamar stayed that calm in that situation, especially after everything went to hell, and still got a tutty. Number 2, no one can deny that Lamar has some of the best records ever this season. First player in NFL history to reach 4,000 passing yards and 900 rushing yards in the same season. That's insane. First quarterback in NFL history with at least 40 passing touchdowns, 41 to be exact, and 4 or less interceptions. 4th best quarterback passer rating in a single season in NFL history, and the first reigning MVP to throw 40 or more touchdowns the season after he won MVP. So despite an OP run game, Jackson was still the only quarterback in NFL history to throw 41 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, which is just an absolutely insane KD ratio. And 3, look at the strength of schedule the Ravens had in their division alone. The Ravens had to get past the high-powered Bengals offense twice, and the Steelers, who made the playoffs. The Ravens also beat 7 playoff teams. How many playoff teams did the Bills beat? 2. Therefore, Lamar has a far greater strength of schedule MVP case than Josh. In fact, the Bills really beat a bunch of nobodies, whereas the Ravens were fighting top-tier talent that are actually in the playoffs, minus the Texans because they really suck. The Ravens are the first team in NFL history with over 4,000 passing yards and over 3,000 rushing yards. Jackson accounted for 27% of those rushing yards. The Ravens also became the first team in NFL history to score 40 passing touchdowns, 40 or more passing touchdowns, and 20 rushing touchdowns in the same season. My closing argument for Lamar is look at who he beat, 7 playoff teams versus Josh's 2, how he beat them, mostly through the air, and his insane touchdown interception KD ratio. Also, how he outdueled Allen once and blew out the Bills, and outdueled Burrow twice, both who were the other MVP candidates. So basically, Lamar beat both MVP candidates. Now, who I believe will win MVP, both Josh and Lamar had outstanding seasons, setting NFL records and bringing their team to success. Now, obviously, if I was a Ravens fan, I would go with Lamar 1,000%, but since I'm a biased Bills fan, I have to go with Josh Allen, and here's why, Ravens fans. Josh's performance was exceptional when it mattered the most. Now, I know the Ravens didn't face the Lions and the Chiefs, but they lost to the Chiefs. Allen beat the Chiefs handily by 2 scores. That says says something when Josh Allen beats the only team that's undefeated in the NFL and the number one seed in the AFC, let alone Josh doing it again to the number one seed in the NFC. Josh wins because he was dominant in the biggest games, in the biggest moments against the best opponents, which is truly a measure of MVP. Lamar undoubtedly shined in big moments, but it was against lesser opponents with worse records. Bengals, Steelers, Texans, Broncos. And they had some very questionable L's against teams they should have otherwise beaten. Raiders, Browns. And the icing on the Josh Allen cake is that Allen played fewer games than Lamar because the Bills had blown out so many opponents, they would pull Allen by the time the fourth quarter started. Not to mention, Allen played the entire almost the entire season with a broken left hand and still had a record-setting season. My closing argument for why Josh Allen deserves the MVP over Lamar Jackson is this. Inspired by my Uncle Tony, Tony the P. It's not just based on statistics. MVP is just that. Most valuable player to your team. Josh is that. All the talking heads said we were going to have a down year. Josh made sure that did not happen. Thank you, Uncle Tony. Comment below who you think should be the MVP so that we can argue back and forth about why Josh deserves it more. Go Bills!